I'm going to ask Jennifer Miller from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to do a roll call of all the commission members. So Jennifer, if you would, go ahead and do that.
Okay, good morning. Sheriff Ashley.
Here.
Commissioner Bartlett.
Here.
Senator Book.
Good morning, everyone.
Commissioner Carroll. I think you're muted, Commissioner Carroll. We can see your.
Good.
Okay. Commissioner Dodd.
Here.
Commissioner Harpring.
Here.
Sheriff Judd.
Sheriff Judd is going to be late.
Okay. Commissioner Larkin Skinner.
Good morning, I'm here.
Commissioner Nelson.
Here.
Commissioner Petty.
I'm here.
Commissioner Powers.
Here.
Commissioner Schachter.
Here.
Commissioner Stewart.
Here.
Commissioner Swearingen won't be here today. Commissioner Lystad. I see you up there. Sheriff Galtieri's here. Secretary Marstiller.
Here.
Secretary Mayhew.
Here.
Mr. Oliva.
I'm here, thank you.
Secretary Popple.
Hi, this is Patty Babcock. I'm sitting in for Secretary Popple.
Okay. We're good to go, Sheriff.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's good to be back together again, albeit in a different format. As we know, we've had to cancel a couple of in-person meetings because of the situation we're in with COVID, but we thought that there is some commission business that we need to take care of. And we thought it'd be good to have a meeting to discuss kind of where we've been, where we are, where we're going. I would characterize this as more of an administrative type meeting, kind of an overview. Don't intend to get deep into any specific topics. Other than we are going to, as you can see from the agenda, have an update from Director Damian Kelly from the Office of Safe Schools as to where they are and what's happened and changed in the Office of Safe Schools and how they're operating in the COVID environment. So that's kind of the plan for this morning, and then we'll talk about where we go from here. Before we get into the briefing from Director Kelly, we do have some meeting minutes that were sent to everyone from our October 31st, 2019 meeting. You should have received those and had an opportunity to review them. So we have a motion to approve the minutes from the October 1st, 2019 meeting. Somebody can just either speak up and or raise your hand is helpful. Sometimes we see a hand go up too. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Commissioner Harpering moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
And Commissioner Dodds a second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
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 All right, the motion carries. Those minutes are approved from August 31st. I'm going to ask Director Kelly to give us an update on the Office of Safe Schools and from his perspective, where the schools are in Florida and where the districts are. They're operating in the COVID environment. Some of the districts went back a couple weeks ago. Some went back a week ago. Some, I believe, are yet to go back in person. It is really a hybrid. Before I turn it over, because it'll come up, I just want to cover it here. There's been a lot of questions about it. Before I turn it over to Director Kelly, I just want to tell you where things are regarding the Guardian program and Guardian funding, because there's been a lot of questions about it. As you all know and remember, in Senate Bill 7026, is the legislature allocated non-recurring state funding $67 million for the Guardian program. I think we all know the history of 2018 and the back and forth of what happened. It was implemented in a hybrid fashion with the dedicated guardians and also in some districts with the school employees. After it was implemented, there was left sitting there going into the next 26 into the legislature. Was getting an echo there, but hopefully it's all right now. There was, again, non-recurring funding. The legislature rolled over that non-recurring funding from 1819 to 1920. So even though it was still non-recurring, the legislature rolled it over. And that funding was imperative because it was funding that was used to do all of the backgrounds, the psychologicals, the drug screens, buying equipment such as guns and holsters and uniforms and all of those tangible things, as well as paying for the cost of the training itself for that basically month-long academy and the cost of the personnel to put on the training. So it was imperative, it is imperative to the success of the program. And as we moved into this year, into 2020, and there had been grant applications that had been completed by the sheriffs and funds had been encumbered and set aside. But because of COVID, a lot of that training didn't occur. A lot of the purchases weren't made as the schools were no longer in session in March, April, May, et cetera. So the chunk of that money was encumbered for this fiscal year, but it was sitting on the sidelines because it wasn't being used. What I think everybody anticipated was that coming into the new fiscal year on July 1st of 2020, the 2021 fiscal year for the state, that money would yet again roll over. Well, it didn't, and it was on the governor's veto list. And there was about $41.5 million of the original 67 that was still sitting there on June 30th of this year. And the state took that money back and in essence defunded the Guardian program. So there was no money for Guardian backgrounds, drug screens, psychologicals, all the equipment and all the training costs. Some agencies already had training set for July and into August in anticipation of school going back. And again, that money evaporated on June 30th. So what Commissioner Corcoran was able to do and DOE was able to do was to take some of that money that had already been obligated and encumbered in the previous fiscal year and allow it to continue to be spent because it had already been encumbered up until August 20th. So we had a meeting with all the school superintendents and the sheriffs back in June and encouraged them to do as much as they could before August 20th. And then they have to have their invoices in by tomorrow, September 1st to DOE. And the idea being that we will then know, and I've given the sheriffs until this Thursday to give us a report on what their unfunded needs will be from now through June 30th. And then we're going to try and look for money and see if there's any funding sources out there and available. If not, and there's no funding sources available anywhere at a state level, then it's really going to fall back to the individual school districts. And there are some challenges in some places, no doubt. And Broward is one of them with being able to do the Guardian training, buy the equipment and all the things that are necessary. So I don't know. I have no idea we have new presiding officers coming in the legislature. I have no idea whether there's an appetite come next legislative session to again fund the Guardian program. I think it's way too early to know and to tell on that. But the immediate thing that's on the table is to make sure that these Guardian academies can be done and that we can make sure that there is that good person with a gun, that safe school officer that's required on every charter elementary, middle, and high school campus in the state of Florida, and that is sustainable throughout this year. And key to that are the Guardians. So I know that, again, Commissioner Corcoran's aware of it, concerned about it, and willing to try and work to figure out if there's a way to do it. And if not, I go back to it's going to go back to the school districts. And I'm not sure where all of it plays out, but we'll know more probably in the next week or so as to what that deficit is. My estimate, my guess, is the deficit is of unfunded requirements in order to do all of the training across the state. It's probably somewhere, I'm guessing somewhere around $5 million, probably somewhere in that range, maybe a little bit more than that. That's the best estimate. But again, we'll know more when we get the reports in from the sheriffs at the end of this week. So I want to cover that before Damien gets into the update from the Office of Safe Schools, because that Guardian program, there's a lot of questions, and it's obviously key to school safety. So does anybody have any questions on that before I turn it over to Director Kelly? Okay. Not hearing any. I'll turn it over to Director Damien Kelly from DOE Office of Safe Schools for an update. Director Kelly, it's all yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. Thank you for this opportunity to give you a report today on everything that's been happening here at the Office of Safe Schools. I did send 3 items to be distributed to the Commission. The first one is something we're extremely proud of here, and that is our new Marjory Stoneman Douglas Remembrance Wall. We were fortunate to be able to get some funding to have this project completed. We're very thrilled with how it turned out, and it's the main purpose of it is so that everyone who comes through our office and everybody who works in this office will remember. It'll be a daily reminder of the importance of their work. The second item that I sent was an org chart of where we are today in the Office of Safe Schools. And as you can see, we've gone from a team of 5 to a team of 17. And I'd like to thank Commissioner Corcoran for providing those 12 additional positions. One of the positions that I want to highlight is a contractor who is embedded here with us now. Spencer Hawkins works for Haystacks. And it was important to us to have somebody here that could troubleshoot any technical issues that people were having with the Fsat, and we're very fortunate to have him here. The third item was a breakdown of our regional map. We have 6 regions and 6 regional staff members. One of our staff members from Region 1 is actually currently deployed for a year and with his guard unit. And we were fortunate that 2 of the Tallahassee-based staff people have stepped up and are sharing his duties. One of the other things I want to point out on that map is that we list the 3 consortia that we have across the state, and we've found that we've been able to work hand in hand when it comes to dealing with or getting the message out to some of our districts, and we appreciate all the help that we get from them. Moving on, I want to give you a quick update on where we are as far as site visits. We began visiting schools once the regional staff were trained back in mid-January, and from mid-January to early March, 210 school visits were completed with compliance walkthroughs by our regional staff. A quick update on the most recent survey of school safety specialists. We have, our records now show we have 3,712 schools statewide, and taking care of our students at these schools are 3,065 law enforcement officers and 1,235 co-chair and vice guardians. I'm going to move on to Fsat. All of the school assessments for the 2019-2020 school year were completed by October. All of the school-based assessments and all of the district assessments were completed by November of 2019. The current year's Fsat was made available a week ahead of the May 1 deadline. So schools were able to get a head start on completing this year's Fsat. The statewide threat assessment database work group, their report was due on December 31st of 2019, and that report was completed on time. The school hardening and harm mitigation work group, the required report was submitted ahead of the August 1st, 2020 deadline. I have provided the work group's recommendations to Commissioner Corcoran. The report summary of recommendations will be delivered tomorrow to the governor, the Senate president, and the Speaker of the House. And I will be providing a copy of that summary to the commission. Co-chair and vice guardian program update. We currently have 43 school districts that are utilizing guardians as safe school officers through a variety of means. 39 sheriff's offices have been awarded funding to provide this training. And of the 1,235 guardians, 71 of those are security guard guardians. That number while I'm on the topic of guardians will increase, we have not sent out a survey. The chairman did not want one sent out as of yet, but we do know, for example, we visited Bay County with myself and two of our staff went over to see the guardians being trained, and they're actually doubling the number of guardians. They had 22 more guardians that were going through training, so that number will increase as we move forward. The Guardian Education Program is something that we're very proud of here. This was a directive that the governor sent to Commissioner Corcoran on February 12th in a letter that he crafted. The Office of Safe Schools developed a 28-slide informational PowerPoint to provide a general overview of the Coach Aaron Fleiss Guardian Program and address some of the myths and misconceptions that the public has to what it is. With that training and what that training and expectations look like, and how Coach Aaron Fleiss guardians support safety and security in our schools and school districts. This also was a directive of the governor in that February 12th letter. I would like to say a special thank you to Pasco County Sheriff Chris Nocco, Baker County School Superintendent Sherry Rollerson, and Suwannee County Schools Safety Specialist Malcolm Hines for providing video testimonials for this PowerPoint. Update on Assessor. We got 3 sections of it here. Assessor, the new rule, and question and answers on the Assessor program, and also Assessor training. The State Board of Education approved the new Assessor rule in the May 20th meeting. The rule better aligns Assessor definitions with Florida Criminal Code, clarifies reporting requirements, and addresses accountability for Assessor data quality. This also was a directive from the governor in his February 12th letter. We also now have an About Assessor page that has been added to the website. This resource addresses many of the commonly asked questions regarding Assessor reporting and data. This also was a directive of the governor in his February 12th letter. A total of 16 virtual and in-person Assessor training workshops have been delivered since the rule was finalized in June of this year. The Assessor visualization tool is a new program that our IT section is working on. An RFQ was released on June 20th, 2020, with responses due on June 26th, 2020. The department plans to launch a visualization tool for school environmental safety incident reporting, or Assessor data. The tool will display Assessor data in maps and make it easier for users to recognize patterns in and derive meaning from this data. In July, a purchase order was issued to Urban SDK, which is a Jacksonville-based company, for providing the Assessor visualization tool. An internal project meeting took place on August 3rd of 2020. Still under training, we're going to move over to Fsat. 4 8-hour in-person training sessions were held over the summer with school safety specialists as primary audience. Within the Fsat tool, there are a series of best practice videos that instruct users on how to conduct an assessment. The tool also includes how-to videos that focus on navigation within the tool. We are currently working with the Fsat provider to produce some on-demand webinars, which will be available early in September. Next section we want to talk about with training is CSTAG, or the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines Training. 2 CSTAG training sessions were offered in the spring of 2020. The first one was for new Office of Safe School staff and district personnel from North Florida, and another for small rural districts that needed further training. As a note, I would like to thank FDLE Commissioner Rick Swearingen for attending the first training that we had here at our building in Tallahassee. It's very insightful when anytime a commission member can come and speak to people from our district. So thank you, Commissioner Swearingen. Districts from across the state have been actively engaged in CSTAG training this summer. 10 CSTAG workshops were delivered in the latter part of August. This 8-hour training reinforces effective threat assessment initiatives and supports districts in their compliance efforts. On the topic of threat assessments, we have held 2 meetings with FDLE via conference call to discuss threat assessment best practices. and we plan to meet again in the near future. This also was a directive in the governor's February 12th letter to Commissioner Corcoran. School safety specialist training. In the month of July, we had 3 sessions, 3 4-day sessions in Orlando for school safety specialists. 83 school safety specialists and colleagues were trained during the 3 4-day sessions. Topics included active shooter response, bomb threats, crisis communication, mental health, pandemic planning and response, and the Fsat. There was also a presentation on FERPA, which was done via Zoom by Pamela Hepp from Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney, who, if you remember, presented before this commission in August of 2019. Before I move on from the training, I would like to thank Commissioner Petty for taking his time to come to the first session of our school safety specialist training and address the group. I also like to thank Commissioner Schachter for attending the second training session and addressing the group, and also Under Sheriff Jim Harpring for taking his time to come to Orlando and address the group. And finally, I'd like to thank Stanville Parkland President Tony Maltato, who took his own time to come to Orlando, and he gave a very interesting presentation to the group. So thank you to everybody. Next section, threat assessment and reviews. As required by law, the Office of Safe School reviewed and evaluated all 75 school district and 387 charter school governing boards behavioral threat assessment policies and procedures by August of 2020. Some governing boards have chosen to adopt and align with the school district's policies and procedures, while others have chosen to develop their own. Office of Safe Schools staff will continue providing technical assistance and training throughout the year to further strengthen the efforts and ensure statewide consistency with expectations. The ITN for Alyssa's Law. The only thing that I'm at liberty to say on it today is that it has been approved here by leadership in our building, and the ITN is scheduled to be advertised today. I'd like to thank Sheriff Galtieri for assigning Under Sheriff Jim Harpring as a work group member. And I'd like to thank Commissioner Swearingen for assigning FDLE Assistant Special Agent in Charge Annie White to be a part of the work group to develop the ITN. And thank you to Commissioner Harpring for being a part of that group. This also was a directive of the governor in his February 12th letter to Commissioner Corcoran. Next section, last section I want to cover is COVID. Our regional staff has begun to visit our schools again. They've been basically working from home, getting these threat assessment policy and procedures reviewed. And but once the August 10th came and schools opened, our staff began to visit schools again, and they will be visiting schools currently 3 days a week. Guidance so far has been given out on during COVID. Fire drill guidance on August 4th, 2020, a directive from Florida Chief Financial Officer and State Fire Marshal Jimmy Petronas outlined guidance specific to fire safety drills and allowing for social distancing. For emergency drills guidance on August 7, 2020, a memorandum was sent out to all school district superintendents and charter school leaders regarding emergency drills during COVID-19. Although the frequency and the number of drills will not change, the memorandum reiterated the need to conduct drills while offering flexibility for the manner in which they are to be continued while following Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the Florida Department of Health guidelines. On August 10th, I visited schools in Baker County for their opening day of school with Superintendent Sherry Rollerson and Assistant Superintendent School Safety Specialist David Crawford. Baker schools were welcoming back 97% of their students coming back to brick and mortar schools. It was actually a wonderful day, and it was nice to see all the smiling faces on students as they met their friends again and came back to school. I did a follow-up with David Crawford when Baker Middle School were conducting their first fire drill. The school was divided into 3 zones, and evacuation was done one zone at a time to one staging area at a time. Social distancing was followed. Baker County Fire Chief and the district's nurse supervisor were present, and the drills went very well. Additional COVID information, guidance was provided to school districts stating that there are no changes to the requirements for safe school officer coverage. Many districts are planning to use staged evacuations for drills. Several districts are reporting to us that they are restricting visitors to schools during COVID. Some districts will require assigned seating on school buses and in cafeterias, and have focused on improving the accuracy of attendance. Both help with contact tracing if a student has positive for COVID. And to finish, I would like to thank all of our school superintendents, our school safety specialists for all of the work they've done to improve school safety. I would like to thank this commission for all of its work to improve school safety. And I'd like to thank all of our law enforcement officers and guardians for keeping our students safe, students and educators safe. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Kelly. Commissioners, any questions for Director Kelly? Commissioner Dodd and then Commissioner Schachter.
Thank you, Damian, for that report. I did have a question about safe school funding, and I know we talked about the Guardian funding, but I had a question about safe school funding. I've heard from some districts that have entered into a franchise agreement with Florida Virtual that they don't have those FTE students. So I understand their safe schools funding will be reflected because those students are no longer part of that district funding cycle. So I was just kind of curious if you've heard anything about that and how that looked. I know in Citrus County, we have 25% of our students that have gone to virtual. We do have 75% in brick and mortar, but we had a different agreement with Florida Virtual where we actually purchased the curriculum and our teachers are teaching. So I was just kind of curious if you had any update on that for us.
No, we haven't had anything come to our office so far regarding changes in funding. It is something that we can reach out to finance and operations and try to get updated figures.
Well, I think it's something we need to consider. I mean, we're trying to, this is not a normal year. It's something that we're going to be dealing with, and we've tried to encourage, the superintendents have encouraged, the opportunity for, students to go from virtual back to brick and mortar, and that's tough. I mean, once we get them into virtual, it's tough to bring them back, but they kind of want to have an open door there. And I think Mr. Leva would probably, that's pretty much the way it is, right? From the DOE.
Is it okay, Chair Gaultier, to respond to?
Go ahead, Chancellor.
So thank you, and thank you for that question. And I'll just add to that topic a little bit. Damian mentioned some of the information that we've been sharing with districts around COVID and how to reopen our schools safely right here in the fall, as all of our districts are doing as they've been coming on board. And we've established a website, I think it'd be good for the members to know, on our DOE website page, where we have posted every webinar, every memo, resources for parents, resources for schools around COVID. And if you haven't been on there, it's quite robust and exhaustive, and it's still active, and we're continuing to provide updates on that as well. But to speak to your question specifically, Mr. Dodd, part of Emergency Order 2006 that was signed by Commissioner Corcoran was to give the districts some assurances for funding and the categoricals as it related to projected FTE, which is a full-time equivalency. So for schools that have chosen to follow the directives in the emergency order, such as submitting a reopening plan and filling out the forms of the assurances that they have put in place, those districts would be able to capture their projected FTE enrollment that is pretty much given out around July, and know for the first term that is what their projected enrollment would be funded on. And that gives them a little bit of a safety net for planning purposes moving forward. So as far as the FEFP categoricals are concerned, at this time, there's no intention of recalibrating that.
Thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner Dodd?
No, that's all. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Schachter, go ahead.
Director Kelly, great job. Under your leadership, the Office of Safe Schools is becoming a model for the rest of the country. So thank you for all of your efforts, your team, and all of the school safety specialists. I know they worked, very, very hard this summer to get their schools ready. The memorial that you made at DOE is beautiful. So, from all of the MSD victims' families, we thank you. I'm also extremely glad that the Assessor visualization tool is being developed. Assessor is the only measurement that we currently have for analyzing what incidents are happening inside our schools. So we would have no metrics for how many fights, sexual assaults, bullying, vaping, and weapon possession incidents if it were not for Assessor. So I think that data is extremely important, and I'm really happy that the state is moving forward and developing a tool to really provide that information to the public and to parents. Do you have any idea when that will be rolled out?
I don't at this time, but whenever our IT team give us an update, I'll be happy to provide it to the commission.
Okay, thank you, Director.
So I guess while we're a little bit on that topic, Mr. Schachter, Assessor and the tool, because it'll lead into what we talk about as we move into the steps and the pathway forward. And Director Kelly, if you can just add some clarification to this, if I don't have it correct, is when we had our meetings last year and we had the panel with the superintendents, et cetera, and all the issues were raised, and if you remember the presentations that Sergeant Cease did, et cetera, and all the issues that we highlighted and spotlighted, with Assessor, and they're significant. You had zero reporting in Miami-Dade County and batteries. You had excessive reporting in Alachua County, some schools all over the board, and then you all made changes. And my understanding is that the first time we'll see the data as a result of the changes in the code, the changes in the policies and procedures, et cetera, and see whether the districts have made improvement. The first time we'll be able to have access to data that is post those changes will be October of this year. So Assessor data will be reported in October, and that will be the proper time to do an analysis of that. And probably we would ask Sergeant Cease to go back and do that same analysis as you did previously. So we're comparing the data from the problematic period to the new period post changes. So is that correct? We really have to wait until this October data to know whether there's been a positive improvement in Assessor. Is that correct?
Yeah, I discussed this with Julie Collins from our team, and she had advised me that it would be October of next year, that this year's data will not reflect the changes in the rule. It will take a year for those changes to be reflected.
So actually, we won't have data that's reflective of the changes that we put in place until October of 2021.
Correct.
Okay. So is your, I guess, view of it, and it seems like it is Julie Collins' view, who is really DOE subject matter expert on this. So looking at the data now or prior to that time would not be effective. It would not be an accurate assessment of what has changed. So it'd be really useless to do any analysis prior to October of 2021.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. Thanks for the clarification there. For some reason, I thought it would be October of this year, but it makes sense. And some of it also, and another problem with it would be, and I'll just kind of point this out, is that during a significant portion of the reporting period, the campuses were empty. They were vacant, and they've been vacant since probably March. And it probably wouldn't give us an accurate window, and we wouldn't be comparing like to like. Because there'd be a huge decline unless you had significant variances. It probably would not be a good comparison. I guess we'll add that, when we talk about that later on the path forward and we put that on the list, we should absolutely note that doing assessor analysis is probably ineffective and probably not fair. Go ahead, Mr. Schneck.
Sheriff, I would, like to state that, we've had Assessor for years and years, and schools are responsible for accurately reporting the incidents that are going on in their campus. So I understand the new Assessor definitions, are not going to be, go into effect until next year, but that does not absolve every school in the district from accurately reporting what's happening. Currently, we have over 411 elementary schools, 94 combination schools, 21 middle schools, and 31 high schools that don't even report to DOE, that didn't report any numbers. And as of the last Assessor report, we had Miami-Dade County, amongst their 600 schools, only report a total of 18 battery incidents and 45 weapon possession incidents among all their 600 schools. So I hear what you're saying, but we've got to make sure that these schools are accurately reporting this information because they're on notice. So we're going to be looking at it.
And just for clarity, and make sure and correct this if this is not right, but that those numbers that you cited, you just stated, were based upon the 1819 data, correct? And that 1819 data, of course, was occurring. The events that led to the reporting or non-reporting occurred before our November of 2019 report, where we called all this out. So no doubt, there was a problem in the analysis and what the presentations that we did to the commission. We used 1718 data for that. I think your point is the 1819 data is no better, but they hadn't been, if you will, called out. They hadn't been pointed out to them about these major problems. And so I guess what I would say to that is that why would we expect a different result when it hadn't been addressed? Now it's been addressed, and DOE has made changes that have been implemented, and we've had the panel discussion with the superintendents, et cetera, and it seems that the reasonable thing to do, the appropriate thing to do, is to give them a chance to get it right. And unfortunately, just because of the reporting cycles and having to give it time and a like-to-like comparison when they're actually on the campuses, we're not going to be able to see that until October of 2021 and know whether we have a marked improvement or whether we still have a problem.
I agree.
Okay. I didn't see any other hands go up. I do have another question, and if anybody else does, I'll recognize you. But I have another. Director Kelly, you mentioned on the threat assessment review, and the statute requires that DOE have done an assessment of the threat assessment policies of all the charters and of all the districts. And you mentioned that you all had done that, but I didn't hear anything about the results of that review. How would you describe it? I have no expectation, because again, this is evolving and probably a work in progress in some places. It is probably one of the most important areas, behavioral threat assessments, and making every effort, certainly not just at harm mitigation, but at prevention, and threat assessments are important, but it's also an evolving area. So how would you describe your review, the department's review of those policies that are in place? Are they all over the board? Are they largely in good shape? Are they largely not in good shape? I'm sure, I don't put words in your mouth, but I'm sure in some places there's room for improvement. But tell us the results of that review.
Yes, Mr. Chair. How the review was done, it was a very lengthy process, and it was sort of done in stages, because initially some of them that we reviewed would not have mirrored the model that the state has adopted. So we had a lot of back and forth with them to get their language to be changed, and we can report that all across the state, 100% compliance with the language in their threat assessment policies and procedures. The other thing that I think is huge moving forward is that we have multiple staff members who will travel the state to continue these 8-hour training sessions for districts that need it. And also we will have our regional staff reviewing this at the school level. So I think with the numbers that we have available now, to be out there in the field and to be have good partnerships with our schools and our school districts, I feel very good moving forward that this is an area that we will continue to stress. And as I said earlier, it's an area that we will be meeting again and again with FDLE to discuss whatever best practices there are out there. And I think sometime in the future, we should be able to give you an updated report of where are we.
So every district and every charter has a policy that at least tracks the minimums of the recommended policy from DOE.
Yes, sir.
And now, of course, since these policies have been in place, we're in that same situation again where we haven't seen them implemented because the schools haven't been in session since March. So now they're coming back. So that was a work in progress while the schools were out, correct? So a lot of them we really need to see how they're implementing those, correct?
Yes, sir. And also we're able to track everything that goes on with these assessments through the Fsat. That's where we gathered all the information from our districts. And like I say, it didn't all happen overnight, but every single district and every single charter governing board received a letter from our office saying that they were in compliance.
And one last thing on threat assessments, one of the things, and of course, we'll talk about it here as we segue into the next topic, and that is the results of this legislative session. But of course, none of the bills passed, but you all did put together, as part of the last bill in 7030, the behavioral threat assessment work group. And that work group made some recommendations. Is there any effort by anybody in DOE or anyone regarding that statewide behavioral threat assessment instrument and that database? Is the department going to seek funding for that? Is that moving forward at all? Is there any update on the status of that?
The work group completed their report. There hasn't been any movement so far. And I know they're across the state, we are going to have funding challenges as a result of COVID. Some of our individual districts have gone ahead and got their own platform. But I would hope that, when budget is not as tight as things are right now, that this is something that will be readdressed and it's something we can have statewide in the future.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, Chancellor Lee, but can you speak to that at all from a DOE administration standpoint? Is there any discussion being had about that database and whether I understand it's going to have a significant price tag? It is important. I think it's extremely important to tie it all together, and we've had elaborate discussions in the commission about it. Do you think it's just not going to happen?
Well, I wouldn't say that nothing's impossible and it's not going to happen. And I think the timing of this conversation is actually pretty spot on, because I know Commissioner Corcoran and the policy team are putting together next year's legislative budget requests and building a budget and working with staff right now. So I will be able to, after this call, follow up with them and let them know that this is a priority of the commission, if this is how the commission feels, and see if we can put that request forward and put that as part of our legislative agenda.
Yeah. Well, I'll put it out this way. Is there anybody on the commission that does not feel that a statewide behavioral threat assessment database and an automated tool is a priority? Is there anybody that feels like it's not? So I think you can represent to the commissioner that the commission feels that it is. I know we've had a robust discussion about it in the past. That's why I really don't want to take a lot more time on it, but we've had a lot of discussion about it, and I think we all can see the value. So if you would convey those thoughts, that would be much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Is anybody else, and I know for drills, and I'll just get this, drills are being done, but in some places they're being done differently. And as Director Kelly talked about, Baker County gave some examples, but they're being done. And I think the districts recognize, we had a call with the superintendents. I think they recognize their obligation, but they're not all being done with movement. Some of them are being done with verbalization. They're trying to alternate in this COVID environment, trying to balance the COVID requirements and needs and those safety needs with COVID with the safety needs of school safety from a traditional active assailant standpoint. So I think that's a work in progress from what I see and from talking to the superintendents I've talked to. But does anybody else have any other questions for Director Kelly?
Sheriff Ashley here in Okaloosa. Damien, thank you for your report. Thank you for what your group does. You've done a yeoman's task. I appreciate you and the commissioner sending a letter to our school district to kind of expand what the intent of the statute was in regards to what a safe school officer is. We've got one of our schools is on a military base and they won't allow guardians to have firearms on base. DOD's been providing that safe school officer for a while, but for some reason this year they determined that they don't meet the criteria in statute. And so I didn't know if your department or if this commission needs to go to the legislature this year and ask to expand the criteria for those approved to be a SRO on a military base school. They feel like military police do not fit the criteria, and I was hoping we might expand that in legislation. Does the Department of Education, are they looking to do that, or?
Yeah, this is the first occurrence that we've had across the state. We do have schools on military installations, but the one that you have in Okaloosa, it was an exclusive jurisdiction base, which created a problem for an SRO. For example, over in Bay County, Tyndall Air Force Base has a school on base, but and the safe school officer there is a member of the school district police department, but they're not a exclusive jurisdiction base. I think this is something we will look to address because it could become problematic in the future. We were fortunate on Friday to be able to get that letter crafted and get it out. Hopefully it will resolve your situation for now.
Well, it didn't resolve it. I appreciate it, but their JAG office thought differently of the intent of the legislation. That aside, I've got a deputy there today and throughout the year until we can rectify that problem. So it'd be helpful if we can get that language changed or at least expanded to include military police.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Director Kelly. We appreciate your time and your being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we'll move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is a review of the results of the 2020 legislative session. There were two, I'll call them big, comprehensive school safety bills that were filed. One in the Senate, Senate Bill 7040, and one in the House, House Bill 7065. As well as some standalone bills. Unfortunately, nothing of significance on school safety passed. I'll just address a couple of the standalone bills. One was, we talked about this, about a verbal threats bill, because as you, I hope recall, there was a change at our request in the previous session, going back into 2019, is that previously, if somebody made a threat, a written threat, there was a transmission requirement in the statute. So it actually had to be transmitted in some fashion, like put it in an email and send it, put it on social media and send it. And if somebody walked into the restroom at the school and wrote on the wall or on the mirror, "I'm going to shoot this place up," it wasn't a crime because there was only a writing, but it wasn't transmitted. So that was changed. And then the problem became is that people were calling and verbalizing threats. So this is distinguished from the bomb threat statute. That's very specific to explosives. It's also different from calling a 911 center, which there are statutes on the books that address those type of scenarios. But if somebody called the school or walked into the office of the school and said, I am here and I'm going to shoot up the school, it's not a crime. So we wanted to expand, and we had a lot of discussion about this. We wanted to expand that statute to also provide a criminal penalty for not just written threats, but for verbal threats. So House Bill 311 was filed and Senate Bill 728 was filed. The Senate bill passed the full Senate. It passed off the floor. House Bill 311 did not pass in the House, and there was pretty significant opposition in the House. And again, we'll have new legislature coming in with new presiding officers and a little bit different leadership. I don't know, we can try and bring it back again, but there was a lot of concern expressed by the House that it would criminalize chatter, that it would criminalize talk. And there was opposition in the House to passing the bill. We tried to work with them and put safeguards in place and modify the language, and we worked pretty hard with them to try and get it to a place that they could live with, and they just couldn't live with it. So that bill died. Again, the Senate bill passed, but the House bill died, and there was just opposition to criminalizing somebody's statement to that effect. So we'll see if we can bring that back again, but it didn't pass. There was a bill filed regarding radio towers that would allow the state to deal with that issue in Broward County to, in essence, compel the placement of radio towers for public safety purposes. That was Senate Bill 1472. It was filed and never got its first hearing. There were other bills that were filed regarding school safety that never got off the ground at all. There was one bill filed regarding mental health. It was a pretty comprehensive bill and it never moved. So those were I'll call them the standalone bills, but the two comprehensive bills, let's talk about Senate Bill 7040. Senate Bill 7040 moved pretty well through the Senate. And Senate Bill 7065 moved, and it was kind of dragging in the House, but it finally, towards the end of the session, it did move. And the Senate, as they refer to it in legislative terms, they laid the bill on the table and they picked up 7065, which was the House bill. And there was a plethora, as there always seems to be when we're talking about school safety bills and the contents of those bills. There was a plethora of amendments that were filed. And the amendments, of course, were filed in committee, but they're also filed when they hit the floor in both chambers. And it was literally down to the last seconds. And I'm talking about literally down to the last seconds on the floor, where the House and the Senate were ping-ponging the bill back and forth with amendments. And it died because they couldn't reach agreement. And so it died on the floor. So all of the recommendations that we made, whether it was about the Guardian program and sheriffs doing the training, whether it was about changes to the drills and the active assailant drill requirements and the timing of all that, everything that we recommended that was in those bills died. It didn't go anywhere. So we really didn't make any progress at all with any of the recommendations this past legislative session. We still have, of course, the bills, and we still have all of the recommendations, and everything's on the table. So my thought is, of course, no bills can be filed until after the November 3rd elections. Committee weeks, I believe, will start sometime in December, and then they'll take a little hiatus over the holiday, begin again in January, and then the session will start in March. I don't know, and this is what I need to hear from you all on, from the recommendations that we made last year. I don't see anything that has changed. I think that the course will be, and I'll take direction from you all, is that I'll talk to leadership in the House and the Senate, see if we can rekindle these and look at where some of the problems were as things were going back and forth this past session, see if there's anything that we need to or could clean up to make it easier to pass these bills, and that we just take another shot at it with the same things we recommended, because obviously we already voted on this, we already recommended it, we already felt that they were necessary changes, and that we just take another shot at it. But one of the things we can't control and it is the process. And the process is, because there are some things in here that are, I'll call them arguably controversial, at least for some people, is we can't control the amendments, and we can't control the negotiations that go on and how it ping pongs back and forth, especially at the end. But what we can't control is that we try and we make our case again and we take it back. The legislature for the last couple of years under Speaker Oliva and President Galvano have been absolutely great to work with, very receptive, and acknowledge that they want to make a difference in school safety. So it's just the process. And again, what happened is that we ran out of time. I think if we had more time in the session, we might have been able to work some of these things out, but it's the fourth quarter and we're on the 1 yard line and the clock hit 0. And so that's why it died. So that's kind of the overview of what happened this legislative session with those bills. Questions, comments, thoughts from any commission members? So unless I'm hearing anything, I'm just going to take this, we'll just take back, and try and work with the legislature, the House and the Senate, and if you will, dust off what we submitted last year and try and bring everything back again, unless I hear anything else. Okay. All right, so that'll be the plan, and we'll look at some of these and see if we can make some progress on it this year. And get back to you on it. So, good. All right. If nobody has anything else on that, we'll move on to on the agenda. The next item is on the agenda is the approval of the settlement agreement. If you recall, our meeting last year when we adopted all these recommendations was held in Orlando. There were a number of organizations and individuals as a result of that meeting that filed a lawsuit against the commission, making a number of allegations of Florida's sunshine laws and other claims. During the litigation process, we were able to cause a number of those initial claims to be removed from the civil complaint that they filed, and get it down to a few claims that were left. And I'll call it in legal terms, the claims were colorable enough that they weren't going to get dismissed by the court. But I don't believe that there was any merit to the claims, but nonetheless, they would have survived and we would have had to go through a litigation process. So we had discussion with the plaintiffs, their lawyers, and reached a proposed settlement of the lawsuit. And I need to bring this proposed settlement to you. You all have received a copy of the proposed settlement agreement. And if the commission votes to accept the terms of the settlement agreement, then we will execute the settlement agreement and the lawsuit will go away and it'll be dismissed by the plaintiffs. If you look at page 2 of the settlement agreement, and I'll just kind of recap here the terms of the settlement agreement, is that on page 2 under paragraph 1A, for any future in-person meetings that are held by the commission is that every effort will be made to hold them in government or non-commercial buildings, but in any event that are reasonably accessible to public transportation and reasonably accessible to parking with no fees, and that the notices for the meetings have to include information about parking or public transportation. Again, this is not a problem. It just says that for any future meetings, every effort will be made. I can tell you with what we experienced before, my plan is, and we can have discussion about it, but my plan is to hold any future meetings every place that we have, right back down in Broward County at BB&T. That's the core of this. This has worked well for us. It is a public meeting and it really fits all the what's laid out there, but it just requires us to make an effort to do that. Paragraph B is the commission will hold public comment at the end of every meeting. If the commission provides a time period for public comment on the agenda, we agree to abide by that time period within a 1-hour window. And if we designate specific times when testimony will be heard, that information will be shared on the commission's public website, which we do with the agenda. and we publish the agenda a week before. So again, this is not hard for us to accomplish what would be required by this agreement. And then over on page 3 under paragraph C, during each commission meeting, the chair will advertise the opportunity for any citizen to offer public comment through the commission's public input and comment section of its public website. And I'll just do that at the end of every meeting. Just remind anybody that wants to provide any public comment can do it. So those are the only 3 conditions of the settlement agreement, that we hold the meetings in a publicly accessible place with easy parking. That's the sum of that. 2 is that we'll hold public comment. If we provide a time period, we'll do it within 1 hour of that. And then the third thing is that we'll just remind everybody that they can provide public comment off the website. So I guess we can do it this way, just following, the right protocols of rules of order, is if we have a motion and we have a second, then we can have discussion and then we can vote on it. So does anybody want to make a motion to approve the settlement agreement?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, so Senator Book makes the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so Commissioner Larkin Skinner is the second, and I'll open it up for any discussion. Any discussion by any of the commission members? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. We don't have any discussion. All in favor of approving the settlement agreement, say aye.
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 Any opposed, same. And so that motion carries unanimously. We'll go ahead and notify the plaintiff's lawyers that the commission has approved the settlement agreement, and we'll get it signed, get it filed, and they will dismiss the lawsuit, and we can move on and back to business. So thank you, everybody, for that. Okay, so the next thing that's on the agenda is commission discussion on future meeting topics and roundtable on commission direction. So I'm going to tell you that from a commission work standpoint, from a staff standpoint, not much has been done over the last several months because of the other things that we've been dealing with COVID and other things. And I think to kind of frame this and to maybe get it going and let you all provide your input on this, is I'm looking at it this way. Does anybody see and have on a list that you have and you can share with us anything left investigatively regarding the incident that we haven't done that needs to be done? That's a question I have for you all. I can't think of anything, but you all may, and you may have some things that you think we need to do. So if you have anything that is regarding the incident, whether it's the law enforcement response, the school response, what happened, anything to do with the other components of what we extensively investigated and held the commission hearings on, anything else, that would be question number one. The next question is, with the status of school safety, the recommendations that we have made, the issues that are out there, not directly related to what happened that day, but the overall bigger picture, is what do we want to know? Who do we want to hear from? What are the topics that we want to address? And I'd say to some of that, what do we hope to get out of it? And then along those lines, but maybe slightly different, is also I'll call it the updates. And we heard a little bit of that today from Director Kelly, but kind of a monitoring of where things are so we can make future recommendations, which is within the statutory mandate of keeping an eye on what's happening so we can make recommendations as we will go back now to the legislature for the 2021 session and try and get some things passed and as we're moving forward. So to that end, And I did this over the weekend. I apologize for the short notice, but I was hoping to maybe just help frame this. Is I sent out to all of you that document that you got yesterday that has some big picture topics of things that would fall into that category of what we would want to hear from. So again, an update on school safety measures. I know that the FBI has been willing to give us an update and come in and give us an update on their revised national call center procedures. Again, the threat assessment working group and all these other things I laid out for you. And kind of where do we go from here? And then after we hear from you all with thoughts, ideas, topics on anything investigatively, anything from an overview standpoint, I'll call this. And then you have some discussion about, there's work that needs to be done. As far as the survey is concerned, Director Kelly mentioned to you all that we did not do a survey yet this year. And the reason for it is that the schools just went back in the last week or so. So trying to do a survey when they are trying to get kids back in the schools and deal with everything they're dealing with, I just decided that it was not prudent to do that. I don't think it's respectful of them and their time and what they're trying to do and open the doors, turn the lights on, and get the kids back into a safe environment. So I think that should wait, but it absolutely has to be done, and we want to be able to update it. So we have a lot of work to do because everything's been basically on hold. So my point of saying that is to say this, is that I'm not sure we're in a position. We have a lot of work to do. I'm not sure we're in a position to hold the October meeting. I don't know that we can put enough together. And number one is that I don't think we could do an October meeting in person. So if we did an October meeting, it would probably be in this environment. And I'm not sure we've got the time because the October meeting is the first week of the month. And I'm not sure that we've got the time and the bandwidth in short order. And, you know, to take what is in this outline that I sent to you, plus whatever else you have, and to have the staff to do the work and put all this together, get the witnesses in place and get everybody in. So, you know, we could decide what we do with that and whether we decide on where we're going. We'll get people working on it and maybe do a meeting and shoot for maybe an in-person meeting after the first of the year sometime, if we can, depending upon, again, the COVID environment, which would be while the legislature is in maybe committee weeks and also, you know, before the session starts and kind of see where we are. So those are thoughts, and I'll open it up to all of you to add to that. But if you would, first, so we can kind of put some order in this, is does anybody see anything that they want to hear more about, what we need to investigate that we haven't done regarding the incident itself? Does anybody have any comments on that? Okay. All right, now, where do we go from here?
Sheriff Jim Harpring here. I agree with you regarding the timing. I think October is premature. I do think it's important that we meet either, you know, during committee weeks or before, sometime before the legislative session goes full bore. And I will say this sort of editorially, and I don't really comment editorially a lot, but for those of us on the commission, for those like Director Kelly and others that are working on this all the time, and most importantly, for the family members, the relatives, and the loved ones of those who have lost their lives or were injured as a result of this incident, it's still live and real for all of us and tangible. And I don't mean to sound cynical, but for everybody else, it becomes less live and real and tangible. And I think our meeting in a time frame associated with legislative activities where we can again focus the public consciousness on this would be critically important if we're going to get any positive movement on recommendations we've made before. So those are my thoughts.
Who's next?
I guess I'll go if I'll go next.
Go ahead, Mr. Schrafe.
Sheriff, there's a couple of things that, I would like for us to address. Let's talk firstly about the law enforcement response. And we made recommendations to improve the Broward Sheriff's Office's active shooter policies and procedures, but we didn't make any recommendations in regards to the rest of the state. We recommended that Broward Sheriff's Office change its active shooter, active assailant policy, but we didn't make any recommendations for the whole state. So I would certainly like us to have a conversation about what recommendations we could make for the whole state to make sure that the other law enforcement agencies in the state do not have those same failed policies and procedures that led to all those officers staying and waiting outside.
So if you look at Mr. Schechter, if you had a chance to, and you may not have, again, because I know I gave it to you only yesterday, but if you have it, or you can take a look at it, if you look at page 2 of the document that I provided you, and the second item on that for follow-up would be Florida Law Enforcement Agency Active Assailant Training and Policy Survey Results. And the bullet is to update that agency active assailant and training policy survey, which would then allow us to have a discussion. So we did that survey previously. So what I would suggest here, and in the time we could have our staff members update that and try and give us an assessment of it. And are we in the same place? Has it gotten better? And then we could use that to drive the discussion and perhaps make recommendations. So I think kind of what you're talking about, unless I'm missing it, if I am, enlighten me, is that I think that would cover what you're asking for, I think.
Yes, Sheriff, that would.
That's why I'm sorry, and that's why again I'm saying that if you look at all that's on here, and I just don't think it's fair to bring like Superintendent Runcie in October. I mean, they're just now, Broward isn't even back in person school. They're just going to be going back. And so what I was thinking, and again, it's up to you all with your input. What I was thinking is, and see if we can do, is maybe in a non-committee week, because especially for like Senator Book, if she could, I'd like to see her be able to participate, is in a non-committee week, maybe in February sometime. So that puts us after the first of the year, it puts us before session starts, maybe in a non-committee week, see if BB&T's together. And in the meantime, we'll start getting commission staff working on these things. We'll work with Director Kelly. And I think we could have a pretty robust meeting for 2 days in February if these are the issues we want to address. But that's what I was thinking, was to shoot maybe for a February in person. And we'll know in the next month or so as the schools go back, we're going to know whether we got, if COVID's going to stay where it is, which the numbers are looking really good right now. And of course, we want it to stay there and sustain, and as they relax, the restrictions in Broward. So that's what I was thinking, was maybe February sometime.
The other issue that I'd like an update on or to address is Fortify Florida. Currently, we did a survey of all about 7 school districts that already had an established tip system. And what we found, and we asked them to compare their established tip system versus the tips that came in from Fortify Florida. And what we found was that 96% of the tips that came in from each of these 6 districts current tip system, 96% of them were actionable versus only 27% were actionable from Fortify Florida. Also, of the established tip system for all these districts that we surveyed, there was only less than 1% was spam versus, if you look at the tips that came in from Fortify Florida, over 60% of the tips that came in from Fortify Florida were spam. So I think that is something that, needs to be fixed. And so I would like to, get an update on that or see what we can do.
Okay, I just added that. I didn't have this on the outline that, you know, I had prepared and sent out to you all, but I just added it. We can certainly do that, and I think it merits consideration and taking a look at it. So I just put it on the list.
Thank you. Thank you. And then the other issues that I think are important is we've done a lot, in this commission, but we haven't addressed reducing violence on campus. And I know our focus has been on active shooters, but I think that the goal, or one of my goals, is to really reduce violence on campus. And how do we do that? So, I mean, I would certainly like to hear testimony from experts. Do we need to see culture and climate surveys done in the schools? And then what programming should schools implement to reduce bullying, reduce fighting, all these things that we're seeing. And if you look at the Assessor numbers, we're seeing, very, very large amounts of fighting and assault. And this is probably, not just in Florida, but it's all over the country. But I think when we talk about school safety, that's something that I look at is what can we do to reduce violence on campus? So that's an area that I would like the commission to, look at.
Okay, so give me some look at in what regard? Because we got to be careful. We may just, it's broad, but we got to stay within the parameters of the statutory mandate too. To make sure we don't veer outside of that. I'm not clear exactly what you're looking for on that in that regard.
Well, I mean, there are programs that schools can implement to reduce violence on campus. We'd like to, at least from a statewide level, what can we do? What's proven? What has research-based, evidence-based practices that we can look to that says reduces bullying, reduces fighting, it creates a positive culture and climate on our school campuses. And there's a lot of, expertise in the state around that. So, what can we do to accomplish that? And then make these recommendations to the state legislature that they implement these and make sure that the schools are doing what they need to do to make our schools safe.
So one of the things I put in here, and I don't know whether they're addressing it or not, and some of it just comes to mind from, hearing you talk, is Governor Desantis Mental Health Task Force. I don't know if they're addressing any of this or not, as far as, and I know Commissioner Larkin-Skinner had mentioned some of this before, social emotional learning and some of those other things that are there. Is this kind of some of that what you're talking about?
Yeah. The latest Secret Service report shows that a lot of these school mass murderers were bullied. So what are the best practices that we can implement on the bullying side to reduce bullying on campus? And then, kind of make sure that we have those recommendations in place and school districts are implementing those. And then I think, I'd like to hear a report on that, the mental health task force as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I hear you. But I mean, we're obviously not in a situation to do any type of a school climate survey. That would have to be something that would be done by the districts. But on this issue of, some of these best practices, I wrote it down. We'll see. And I can have somebody, talk to you further offline, one of the staff members, and see what's out there and see if you got any further ideas about it. So if you want to, I added it to the list, and we'll have somebody talk to you and get some more ideas and more specifics and see what we can do to maybe include something from an overview standpoint at a future meeting. So I added it. We'll have somebody reach out to you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Commissioner Petty, go ahead.
Just a couple of thoughts. So one is, look, it would be out of character for me to request another meeting. I typically think most meetings could be resolved with an email or a phone call, but I do think, and I'd like the commission to consider having an October meeting where we focus in specifically on what we want to ask or push forward as far as the legislative session next year. And I think if we wait until the beginning of next year, February, obviously we might lose Senator Book because of committee meetings or preparation for the session. So I think it would behoove us to have some meeting where we focus in on the legislative priorities for the commission. Now, with that said, I also appreciate the many of the items on the list. One in particular that I was concerned about was Fortify Florida, and it's coupled in the list that was distributed to the commission. It's coupled with another item, but I've got some specific concerns around Fortify Florida. And I think they go to the point of legislative recommendation. So as it sits today, right, Fortify Florida is part of the Attorney General's office, but a lot of the work and information has to go to the school districts and is hopefully actioned on, including the Office of Safe Schools of the Department of Education. The way it's structured today seems to me an opportunity for information silos. So the information needed by districts, by schools, actionable information. I'm not sure how that's flowing into the app, improvements, into the way it's communicated. Just seems to me there's as we've seen in the past, a really likelihood of information silos developing and it not being as effective as the legislature wanted. So I'd like to see if we couldn't at least get a report out from the Attorney General and from the Department of Education, sort of how is it working? How does it work on the back end? What does that process look like? I think there may be some recommendations we could make to improve that in addition to the other items that we've already discussed for the legislature next year.
So I don't know if any of the other law enforcement commission members, want to give views on this. I can tell you, Commissioner Petty, from my perspective, for what I see and being on the receiving end, the issue is not with Fortify Florida. I think that Fortify Florida app and the opportunity that it presents to report is good. I think that to get to one of your points as to who runs it, it's really a joint venture between DOE, FDLE, and the Attorney General's office. And I think the workflow that they set up originally actually is very good. And from a recipient side of what gets initiated is that when somebody reports, I can tell you, we had one yesterday. We had another one on Saturday, is that when people report through it, is that it gets to the right place. Because the school principal is notified, people within the district are notified, law enforcement's notified. And so the notifications are coming. So I don't see that as a problem. What I see is the issue, and maybe with some of the numbers that Mr. Schachter referenced, is that there are competing reporting platforms. So as an example here in our district is they're using Sandy Hook Promise, plus they're using Fortify Florida. Fortify Florida is not robustly used. Other districts have invested in their own reporting platforms, and some have 2 or more even reporting platforms that are available. And, so, and if you get a report from the state on the utilization of Fortify Florida, it's only giving you a snippet, and probably not even much of a snippet, because it is, from what I see, it is probably of all the platforms, it's probably the one that's least used. It doesn't mean it's not being used, but when it is used, it's getting to the right place. So I think you have to, and of course, the individual districts that have their own platforms, all that data and all the information and whether it's working and how it's working, it sits with those districts. So you can't get an overview from the state on this whole picture about the mobile reporting apps, because the Fortify Florida app is only one of many, and in some cases, multitude that are being used in specific areas. So, unless, somebody wanted to, and I would suggest that the appetite wouldn't be there for it. I don't know if this is where you were going, is to have the legislature mandate that the only app be used is Fortify Florida. I don't know how you get around that problem, because these districts have already invested and already marketed. One of the things, and I may be mixing it up, but it may be in the bill that didn't pass, or maybe it was in 70-30 last year that did. Anyway, no, I think it did pass. It was 70-30 last year. Is it required that the districts market Fortify Florida on their tablets, on their computers, and everything else? But just because they're marketing and they're putting it in all the materials, they're also putting their own reporting platforms in the materials as well. And I suggest that those other platforms are being more robustly used. I think that's the problem.
I agree with that. And I think potentially it's creating confusion and silos of information. So I'd love for us to take a look at that. Now, again, do we have time to do that before we make a recommendation to the legislature? I'm not sure. Perhaps the right mode would be for the legislature to take a look at this and say, look, we're mandating, a digital reporting mobile app. Districts and counties are free to pick their own. If they don't have one, then they can use Fortify Florida. But I think as it currently stands right now, at least from the parents and community members that I've spoken to, again, small sample size, I get it. There's A, they don't know about Fortify Florida, or B, there's confusion about how do they report these incidents. And I think we're missing opportunities and bits of information that could really feed into these threat assessment teams, and perhaps even actionable information that needs to get to law enforcement. I think we're missing opportunities.
Well, and this is where I say that I think that October is too soon, because I think that should be part of, and we'll get working on it, but there's no way we could have it by October. I think in order to do this right, is we have to include in part of the next survey that we do on the multitude of topics that we survey. I think we really need to know which districts have other reporting platforms, what those platforms are. And then once we know what the platforms are, we can ask for their workflows and statistics from those districts, and then bring that all back in one package, so that, because right now, and there's enough time, I don't think, between now and October to formulate this, get it out, assess it, get all this information, and to be able to get the metrics for Fortify Florida, identify in each county what the, if you will, competing or additional reporting platforms are. And then, is it a situation in one county where Fortify Florida is being used 10% and X platforms being used 90%? And then look at that local platform, whether it's Sandy Hook Promise or something else, and what is the workflow on that? How is it being used? With some of those platforms, I'll agree with you. On some of those platforms, the workflow is such that it is not going to law enforcement. It is going to the schools, and it's going to some place, but it isn't as robust. I really think that FDLE and DOE did a really good job of setting up the workflow on Fortify Florida, but I can't speak to the workflow on some of these other ones. And that we do a full assessment of it. I just don't know that we can do that in 30 days.
Yeah, I understand. That's a more extensive look at 67 districts. So I understand the concern. I'll throw it out there. I don't know if there's others that have other ideas. It would be nice to get something to the legislature, at least some sort of a recommendation. But I do think at current state, we're missing opportunities to really feed information into those threat assessment teams. And I'm fearful that we're going to miss, not because anybody's not doing the best they can, but there's just too many opportunities for good information to get lost in the current system.
Well, if we shoot for February, it's not too late. I can tell you that. I mean, and if the last couple sessions hold true, with the comprehensive school safety bills, is that they may be in drafting, and there may be some discussion, and most likely they would be, again, I don't speak for the legislature, so I can't tell you definitively what's going to happen, but they come out as committee bills, and generally those committee bills are not finally formulated until after session starts itself. So I think, and Senator Book, feel free to weigh in here if you want to. I don't think that if we were able to put this together, have a meeting in February, assess it, I don't think we're behind the 8 ball as far as making a recommendation to the legislature, especially since chances are it's going to be a committee bill anyway. So, Senator, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for the comments. We're in a different time this year for a lot of reasons, but as the chair mentioned, new presiding officers, new chairs won't be assigned until after November. Not quite sure if we're going to be having a committee meeting in December at all in this COVID time. And so I don't think that we're going to be in a terribly bad place come February. There's as long as the chair and I have some conversation with leadership about something's coming. Here's what we did last year. Here we can work through some of those issues. Here's what we're thinking about this year. I don't think that there will be a problem with that.
Right, that makes sense to me. And there are a lot of takeaways from the work that this commission has done. One of them that just resonates with me again and again was the failure to communicate between agencies, between employees. People had information and didn't share it. It's one of the things that I think, we'll measure the success of this commission on our ability to change that dynamic within the state of Florida. So this is one area where I think we have an opportunity to do that.
Mr. Schachter, go ahead.
Sheriff, I recall that all of the school districts were developing these, the threat assessment teams, and then they were going to have a standardized threat assessment workflow, and then that information would be funneled up to the state. What is the status of that?
Well, that kind of goes to the question that I asked Director Kelly about a little while ago, is that under the law, DOE had to put together that threat assessment work group to make recommendations and to come up with a report. And they did, and I believe we sent that report out to you all last year. I believe it had to be, and Mr. Petty, you were on that work group, and I believe the report was due in December of 2019, if I recall that correctly. And one of the things that we had a lot of discussion about was a standardized behavioral threat assessment process that is driven by a standardized behavioral threat assessment instrument, and that all of the information from the standardized instrument is in a common database that's accessible, so that if you have a student that moves from one district to another, or in adjoining districts, such as Parkland being on the border of Palm Beach County, and you got a kid that's moving back and forth, or things are intertwined, that others with appropriate course access levels would have access to the threat assessments and provide a more global perspective of these people who are the subjects of the threat assessments. And it gets back to the threat management. So, and that's what Chancellor Oliva was speaking about, which, these are challenging times right now for the state, and that he's going to take back to Commissioner Corcoran, this commission's certainly interest and desire, if there's any room, any place, to see that move forward, because we think that the behavioral threat assessments are one of the key elements of especially long-term successful school safety. So I think that instrument standardized, and there is a standardized instrument now, but it's not automated. And there's a process, again, that has to meet certain, but none of it's automated, and nobody has access to it other than on an individual basis. Now, there are some districts, Broward, Hillsborough, a couple, that have invested in their own systems, but that's kind of reminiscent of Here We Go Again. And Here We Go Again is what Mr. Petty was talking about with the Fortify Florida app. So if there's not a standardized database and a standardized electronic instrument, then you've got a situation where others aren't waiting, and they're just going out and they're doing their own, and now we're back to hodgepodge. So that's where it is, and unfortunately, the timing is not good, probably, but we'll see. The timing is not good for the state to invest the significant money that it would be needed to develop that database statewide.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Again, you've got a copy of what I sent out to you all yesterday. I think it's fairly comprehensive. It's certainly room for other input in there. Does anybody have anything now that you want to add to it? Or a way we could leave it is take a look at it and hopefully within the next week or so, submit any written suggestions you have based on this, using this as the jump off place, as the starting place, anything else you'd like to see. So what I've added now, based on the input from commission members, is an update on the Fortify Florida and an update on violence on campus. And we'll flush that out a little bit more, overall violence on campus. Those are two additional topics that I'll add to this outline. Does anybody have anything else for right now that you want to input on? And hopefully does anybody see anything on here that you think we shouldn't cover? That, look, we've been there, done that. We don't need to cover it anymore. Is there anything on here in that regard that anybody sees that should come off? Yeah. All right.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I was looking for mute. Perhaps the way that, and it could be like a longer term study to look at how community violence affects like violence on school campuses would be my only other slight edit.
Okay. Anybody else? So take a look at this, and two things. One, if you see anything that's not on here that you have ideas about, send an email to Jennifer Miller at FDLE, provide your input. And as you're looking at this, you see some things on here that you don't think we need to delve into further, do the same thing. Send something to Jennifer. And then what we'll do is that I'll meet with commission staff and start moving this forward. I'll ask Jennifer to contact BB&T and see what our options are for sometime late January or into February. And then if we can get anything from them, we're going to be a little bit, and the schedule's not out yet, we're going to be a little bit competing with the hockey season down there. So that'll have to come into play in the scheduling of it. And if we can get something, then we can send out a save the date to everybody if we can look at that time frame of late January, early February, which again puts us before the March legislative session, which gives us plenty of time. So unless anybody has any concerns with that as the game plan, we'll use that to move forward with.
Sounds good.
Any other, before we move into public comment, and we do have some, I believe, for public comment. Do any of the commission members have anything else before we move into public comment?
Commissioner or Mr. Chair, I have one question. If we have it at BB&T, will we be in compliance with the settlement agreement?
Yes. Yeah. Nobody's got any issues with it there. Parking's free. It's easy access. BB&T is not a problem as far as the settlement agreement is concerned. Yep. All right. Anybody else? Jennifer, what do we have for public comment? How many do we have? Can you hear me, Jennifer? Harold, can you hear me up there in Tallahassee? Anybody at FDLE, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can. We have approximately, we have 8.
Okay. If you want to go ahead and begin with a public comment, we'll limit everybody to 3 minutes and we'll begin the public comment. And just ask everyone to identify the people as you put them on and ask everybody to state their name for the record, and they'll have 3 minutes to address the commission.
Okay, good morning. First, we have Tony Montalto. Are you on the line?
I am.
Please state your name and then you have 3 minutes.
My name is Tony Montalto. I'm the father of Gina Rose Montalto, one of the victims in the Stoneman Douglas shooting. First of all, I want to say we appreciate the great work by the commission overall. However, we were saddened to see that the school safety bills did not pass the legislative session this year. Although we've had great work to start, clearly more needs to be done. I must also call attention to the work by the Alladef family and their work to get the alerting system law passed. This commission may want to consider recommendations to the legislature on how that should be incorporated into the overall school safety system. Also, I want to thank Damian Kelly and remind people of how lucky we are to have such a dedicated public servant to help make Florida schools safer. I'm happy to see the strong work done to improve the Assessor data. This will help the Office of Safe Schools to produce more effective training for the school safety specialists. Need to remind everybody that a more coordinated effort
I think we lost you, Mr. Montalto. Are you still there? Jennifer, could you tell, did we lose him?
Tony, can you hear us?
Jennifer, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, if he calls back in, we'll let him finish his comments. But in the meantime, it looks like we've lost him. Let's go on to the next public comment.
Okay, the next one is Robert Schindrup.
Go ahead, sir. You're recognized. You have 3 minutes.
Hi there, my name is Robert Schindrup, and I am the brother of Carmen Schindrup, one of the 17 victims of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas school shooting. I would like to thank the commission for all the work that they've done so far, and especially for deciding to allow more accessibility and public input as part of these commission hearings. While I am somewhat disappointed that it took a lawsuit to get to this point, I am very excited by the new additions reached in the settlement. I'm also glad that the commission was able to propose more mental health funding. And although it didn't pass, and I share Mr. Montalto, Tony's disappointment in it not passing as well, I am glad to see that there is more mental health funding being asked for, also for the diversity and educator perspectives on the commission. I think that both of those are extremely important factors. I'm glad that the commission considered them as well. In the wake of the killings of George Floyd, Jacob Blake, and many others at the hands of police, and the calls for resurgence of Black Lives Matter and calls around the ending of police brutality, I think it is important to look at the role of police in schools and how they not only affect a lot of folks like myself who present white, but it's also very important to look at the role that police have, especially when interacting with those with marginalized identities. As we've seen growing this conversation, it is really important to think about not only how do law enforcement make some feel safe, but also how do they impact the safety of others, and especially those who don't look like us. And I think that it's really important when we're thinking about school safety that we think about the safety of everyone, that we think about things outside of our own personal experiences, that we, of course, listen, something the commission has done very well, and make sure that those are things that are factored into the decision-making process. And so, given that due to COVID, many schools are still remote, we hope that we will think more about the mental health needs of our students, given that in Broward County, there are currently, in the state of Florida as a whole, there are currently no districts that meet the counselor to student ratio of 1 counselor for every 250 students. And it's really important to make sure that as we talk, of course, more about mental health, especially with COVID impacts, then we look at the importance of providing resources for mental health within our schools to our most vulnerable students and to those who are going to be suffering negative mental health consequences because of COVID-19 and other reasons. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And we have Mr. Tony Montalto back on the line.
Okay, Mr. Montalto, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead. You can go ahead and finish your comments.
All right, I apologize for that. I don't know why it cut out.
Go ahead.
All right, so we need more recommendations. I apologize, it's out of order. It's hard to know. The next meeting should be before February. We need to have a comprehensive plan for committee weeks. As the chairman commented, we must not let the clock run out on another school safety bill this session. I also feel that it might be beneficial for the committee to reach out to teachers again to see if they will be more willing to cooperate with the investigation. They were relatively silent during the first time around. This might enable the commission to make better recommendations on how also to protect our teachers. Again, thank you for your time. I apologize for the inconvenience, and thanks for your work.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Montalto. Jennifer, next public comment caller.
The next one is Thomas James, and please state your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. This is Thomas James. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hi, guys. I appreciate all your work, and I did speak at the first several commission meetings. People may remember me. Retired teacher, 35 years, also was a coach in my Dade County, worked for the union as a lobbyist, and also worked at DOE during Bush's first term. I've spoken about the Thomas program. That was my initial concern, and I followed this, through, and I'm an activist and a person who's very concerned about school safety, even though I haven't retired from the Florida system for 3 years. Basically, I'm very disturbed, not especially you guys, but I wish you could put more pressure on the governor and his staff to get this statewide grand jury thing going, because it's been 15 months since he announced. I understand, COVID and all the implications of that. However, at the same time, absolutely nothing has been done with regard to anybody in these schools being held accountable for what took place at Marjory, Stoneman, Douglas. And I think that's just a travesty that we're going, this far. We're talking 30, months since the actual incident. You guys know from your investigation, and you were provided testimony from both Broward and Miami-Dade schools, that they had submitted fraudulent school safety information to the Florida Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Education in order to receive millions of dollars from Obama's failed Race to the Top program. Robert Runcie basically admitted as much. He called it misclassifying information. We also know that Dade County, where I worked, did the same thing. The superintendent, Alberto Carvalho, falsely claimed that there were no fights in Dade County schools for an entire school year. I believe that was somewhere around 2015. And he also had failed to notify the Florida Department of Education of a student who was stabbed to death at Coral Gables Senior High School several years ago. So both districts have already been cited by this commission, and absolutely no action has been taken against anybody in these districts. So I implore you, before any more time goes by, to bring the grand jury investigation to closure, present the findings to the public, please indict school officials who we know have committed fraud. The failure to do so is a gross miscarriage of justice, and let superintendents and school board members know that rules and laws don't really apply to them. Thank you very much.
All right, Jennifer, next caller.
Okay, the next one is Chris Curran. Please state your name, and you have 3 minutes.
Good morning. This is Chris Curran. I'm an associate professor and director of the Education Policy Research Center at the University of Florida. Let me begin by saying thank you for the opportunity to provide comment today and to the Commission for their important and timely work on this topic. My research focuses on school safety, school discipline, the use of law enforcement in schools. I've analyzed the use of school police across numerous states and published widely on the topic. I want to begin by commending the Commission on their work to further the safety of students within the state of Florida. As a parent and a former public school teacher myself, I recognize the complexities of this task and the importance of this work. So thank you for engaging in that effort. This week, the Education Policy Research Center is releasing a statewide study of school policing in Florida. The study examines longitudinal data from a 5-year period, including the expansion of law enforcement that followed the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act. Consistent with the intentions of the Act and the recommendations of the Commission, the findings show an increase in police in Florida schools over this period, particularly among elementary schools. The study also finds that the presence of police was not related to increases in exclusionary discipline like suspensions. And this is a finding that is particularly promising and a rather good finding considering that many prior studies of policing in schools have found the opposite. Yet at the same time, some of the findings of this report also point to unintended consequences of students as a result of the presence of police in Florida schools. Specifically, schools with police report more, not fewer, behavioral incidents. More of these incidents are reported to law enforcement, and in turn, schools with police have more frequent school arrests. The worry is that when arrested, particularly for lower level offenses, these responses may actually put students on paths to future trouble rather than success. Just as the previous caller mentioned, with increased attention to racialized police violence in the school to prison pipeline, it's important that these unintended consequences of law enforcement in schools be considered alongside efforts to prevent future acts of mass violence in schools. I know these concerns aren't new to the Commission, and there are examples of agencies across the state, including those here in Alachua County, that have taken active steps to mitigate these unintended consequences. Yet the potential for these side effects of school policing are nevertheless important to reiterate as the Commission pursues its mission of preventing future school violence and ensuring safe schools for all students in the state. One of the commissioners mentioned an interest in hearing more from experts and research in the space. So I'll be happy to share a copy of the study as it's released this week and would also welcome an opportunity to present and discuss further the findings of the study and my research and my understanding of the research more broadly on issues of school safety at a later Commission meeting if there was an interest. So again, thank you for all the work you're doing for Florida students and for the opportunity to talk today.
All right, thank you. Next public speaker.
Okay, it's Christopher Zoller. Please state your name and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Zoller, and I am a current freshman at the University of Central Florida. With the result of the lawsuit regarding accessibility and public comments, I am confident as I stand before you to address the school-to-prison pipeline that is extremely prevalent in our society. As you may know, the school-to-prison pipeline pushes students, particularly Black and LGBTQ+ students, into a disciplinary system that leads to arrests and jail time. Florida, which currently still relies on exclusionary discipline, punishes students using suspension and expulsion, marking these students as bad kids. According to the American Civil Liberties Union in Florida, there are nearly 345,000 suspensions and 570 expulsions each year. Black students in Florida are 2.5 times more likely to be removed from classrooms than their white peers, while 3 of 5 LGBTQ+ students are disciplined through suspensions and expulsions. Today, I call on this Commission to address this issue and make moves to stop the school-to-prison pipeline to protect our students. It's time to invest in education and provide appropriate funding, provide more access to education for students held in detention centers and jails, and overall nurture rather than discipline the minds of our students. Thank you.
All right, Jennifer, who do we have next?
Next is Yasmin Schrafe. You have 3 minutes and please state your name.
Good morning. Hello, my name is Yasmin Schrafe. I am a children's rights advocate at the Southern Poverty Law Center. I would like to address the Commission today on behalf of the Southern Poverty Law Center, our partners and allies, and the many children and families we represent. Like many who have spoken before me, we are grateful that the Commission has previously recommended expanded funding for mental health, which is much needed. And we also appreciate the attention to increase diversity and educator perspectives on the Commission. However, we are deeply concerned about the Commission's continued insistence to expand the presence of police and armed guardians in Florida schools and to expand funding for policing in schools in Florida under the guise of safety. In fact, it is well known the dangers that policing can present to children, especially children of color. If anything, the last few months and the recent killings and shootings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Jacob Blake, Tony McDade, Tatiana Jefferson, and countless others has made all the more clear these dangers to the Black citizens and residents of this country. We urge the Commission to take seriously the nationwide movement around police brutality as a wake-up call, and we urge you to reconsider carefully the racially disparate impacts the policies you propose may have, and the impacts that school policing will have for all children in Florida. Thank you for the opportunity to address the Commission.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead to the next caller.
The next one is Sam Boyd. Please state your name and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Sam Boyd. I'm an attorney for the plaintiffs in the litigation which has been resolved for the settlement approved at today's meeting. I'm now going to read the statement regarding that settlement from one of the plaintiffs, Kinsey Akers, a current high school student and member of March for Our Lives Florida, who is not able to join the meeting today. On behalf of March for Our Lives Florida, I'd like to thank everyone involved for ensuring Florida students have their voices heard in regard to the policies that affect them. As students, we have a right to let our thoughts be considered, and we should feel empowered to do so. It is because of the devotion of our state's hardworking organizers, policymakers, and community members alike that Florida schools are moving promisingly in the direction of safety, and I am proud that Florida students are finally being recognized for their valued perspectives. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead. I think this is the last, correct?
Yep, this is the last one. Octavia Thomas, please state your name and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good morning. I first would like to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak, as well as the other public commenters did. I also want to thank you all for the progress and the work that you all have done over the course of the past year. I've seen so much progress in the commission, and I really do want to take heed to the fact that you all have been working diligently on making Florida schools safer. I also want to re-emphasize the need for this commission and for the work of this commission, as our students are in a very unprecedented time right now, with most students not being in schools or actually seeing their teachers face to face. I think both students, teachers, and administrators alike, all in this time, need support. As we're talking about school safety and what that might look like in the future, I do believe that policing is not the answer. I think we've all kind of really echoed that on today's message, and you all have supported increased funding for mental health counselors in schools, as we know that that's something that you do not see across Florida student schools. Operating under surveillance as a state is not safe for our students. Our students should go to school feeling like school is a place for them to thrive and a place for them to learn, which, as we all know, on that day, our students did not feel safe or did not feel like that was a place for them to learn. This commission has the obligation to amplifying the voice of school safety. I echo the sentiments of someone earlier who was saying that we have to be a little bit more urgent as it relates to school safety. We cannot let another session go by, and we have not adequately discussed measures to improve school safety across the state of Florida. We cannot let another session go by, and we have not discussed what measures we need to take to improve school safety for all backgrounds. As a woman of color, it is very imperative to me that when we're talking about these policies, that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, where they protect some but not all. As we've seen in 2020, racial injustices do exist. Racial biases do exist within individuals. We need to take that into consideration, as we are obliged to take all things into consideration and be very critical of the policies that we present and how it will affect the opportunity and the climate of all of our students across the state of Florida, and what that does to either hinder or advance their environment of schooling and what they see in terms of being able to have hope to have more and to succeed into our Florida public school system. And with that, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, thank you. All right.
Tina, let's see your kitty. Push your camera down a little.
I was just talking to Jeff Wright.
Oh, yeah?
Jennifer, can you mute those that need to be muted up there? Okay, thanks. All right, that concludes the public comment and concludes everything that we have on our agenda. We will move forward consistent with the commission's discussions here today. Just remind everybody, if you have any input, please send an email to Jennifer Miller at FDLE regarding that pathway as we've discussed, and try and do that within the next week if you would, get any input to her. Otherwise, we'll move ahead and see what we can do as far as scheduling that next meeting consistent with our discussions. Unless anybody else has anything that needs to be brought before the commission, that concludes the business for today, and we will recess. Anybody have anything before we recess? All right, well, thank you everybody for your participation, and we'll be in touch. We'll be adjourned. Thank you.